buckle up for probably one of the craziest stories in art history. But before we get into their fight, let me tell you about both of them. Our boys were born 9 months apart. Bernini was son to a sculptor and Borromini to a stonemason. And that, besides talent, were the only thing they had in common. Let's start with the older one. Gian Lorenzo Bernini was born 7th of September 1598 and died 28th November 1680. He was an Italian sculptor and architect creating within the Baroque style. He was also credited with creating Baroque style of sculpture, I guess. He was also into like city planning, so he designed lots of structures and buildings like churches, chapels, public squares, massive works combining sculpture and architecture, even fountains. Dude, he was like creating lots and lots of stuff. And that kind of made him famous. So you can say he was like a celebrity at that point. He worked mostly in marble, as you would as 17th century sculpture, I guess. But Bernini was hell of a son of a bitch in terms of like fighting with people. Like literally on his Wikipedia, there's a chapter that's called Disciples, Collaborators, and Rivals. But besides fighting with people, he was tutoring those people in sculpture, and these people were supervised by him in painting. But what's interesting about his rivals is that one of them was his workshop assistant that was called Matteo Bonucelli, aka Bonarelli. In 1630s, he had an affair with his wife, Constanza. He even made sculpture of her, and Constanza at some point started having an affair with his brother, Luigi, who was his right hand in the studio, and he eventually found out about it and ordered a servant to slash her face with the razor. Jeez, man, what the fuck, dude? You know what happened to that servant? He got in jail. You know what happened to Constanza? Thrown in jail for adultery. Wait, what? Ah, of course. Church state, I'm an idiot. How could I forget? What about Bernini? After all, he was the brain of this whole operation. Was he punished for ordering all of these things? Nah, he was set free by the Pope himself. And speaking about Pope, Bernini married a 12-year-old when he was 41 under orders of Pope Urban. And see, the Pope connects everything, especially with little children involved. And you know what? They had 11 fucking children, poor girl. And one of his sons even became his first biographers. Oh, I almost forgot about Luigi. What happened with Luigi? He at some point just raped one of assistants of the Constantine Memorial in St. Peter's Basilica. And yeah, that happened when you hang out too much in church. But apparently, Bernini chilled out with age and died peacefully in his home at the age 81. And yeah, that sums up spicy things from his life pretty much. So let's move to Francesco Borromini. Borromini was born 25th of September 1599 and died at the age of 67, 2nd of August 1667. And his death was quite unusual. But first, let's introduce our dude. So Francesco was an Italian architect and really good at that. He had quite unusual personality that resulted in him being withdrawn with some works. He was both melancholic and quick in temper, apparently. So I guess it wasn't that hard to have a fight with him. But he might have some kind of nervous disorder, like bipolar or something. I don't know. They didn't know shit about that. Dude was probably depressed and like, they were like, yep, he's just melancholic. And his temper eventually led to his death in 1667, which he ended his life in the Basilica of St. John of the Florentines. Borromini was renovating the place, and after completion, he ran himself through a sword. Yep. And apparently, he was so speedy that he punctured his body from one side to the other. And he apparently survived all of this and was able to tell how he did that, and then just died a couple hours later. So type F in the comments. Besides that, all the spicy things from his life, I guess, mostly come from beef with Bernini, to which we can finally move on. It all played out in the 17th century Rome when they were both in their late 20s. In 1627, while working on extension of Barberini Palace, that main architect was Borromini's uncle, Carlo Mondero, that unfortunately died in 1929, causing our first major complication between the two, because Carlo was the chief of the whole operation and Borromini worked close with his uncle for 2 years and has been well-prepared successor for the head of the whole operation. But Urban VIII was such a cock for Bernini's work, he made him a chief of the whole construction. And that resulted in Borromini's being so mad he got red and got steam pumped out of his ears, cartoony style, and then cry. I don't know. I'm probably close though. So they started hating each other pretty much. In 1930s, Bernini was commissioned to create Baldacchio di San Pietro, and among people working on this piece was Borromini, who created the whole covering. And that the thing is the most important part because it's the thing you're looking at. Unfortunately, he had no acknowledgement whatsoever, thanks to Urban that decided to give him no recognition and probably no money, as Borromini was complaining about that publicly. But when the Pope Urban VIII finally died, big cookery for Bernini ended. And because new Pope Innocenzio X dropped, he didn't like the whole Urban dude to an extent that he even removed people that were working in Urban's favor, including, of course, Bernini. And guess who had replaced him on some projects? Correct, Borromini. Like, for example, the Propaganda Feed Palace that was at first commissioned to Bernini by Urban. That must have pissed him off, especially considering that he lived in front of the palace at that time. But did they live peacefully and then let each other work without any fights? Hell no! Apparently, Borromini had placed a pair of donkey ears on the palace, and Bernini had sculpted a huge dick pointing at the construction. And dude, I don't know, it's just, oh fuck, it's the funniest. And unfortunately, both of these had been removed by the authorities under some decorum act or whatever. I don't know. It would have been great if it stayed. Thankfully, that's not their only visual fight. The next one you can even visit till this day in Rome. You can find it on Piazza Nova Square. In the center of it, you can find a beautiful fountain with the 4 rivers created by Bernini. And these rivers are Ganges, de la Plata, Danube, and Nile, covering its face. And why Nile is covering its face? Of course, it is directly in front of Borromini's church in a big gesture of, it's so ugly, just don't look there. De la Plata also covers its view of the church in a disgust, looking away, or to protect itself from church falling down, a shitty building and all. Danube is literally like, look how beautiful this fountain is. And fountain was being constructed before the church, but I bet they knew about each other projects, hence many visible gestures, although Bernini had some good explanations for what he did. Like, for example, La Plata was a dynamic pose because of movement and vigorous of Baroque. And the Nile source hasn't been geographically located during the 17th century, hence covert eyes. But the amount of hatred they had to each other can suggest it was more of a planned and beautiful fuck you. Of course, Borromini had to answer to that affront. He had placed a statue of Saint Agnes looking away like, ew, don't look at that. Or even like, you call this an art? Beach, please. They even ended up as really bad neighbors at some point. But after Borromini's suicide, Bernini chilled out. Was that connected? Oh, maybe he felt partially responsible for that. Or maybe the fact that his servant and this lady that has her face cut because of him. got in jailed. I don't know. Or other stupid shit he did. We'll never know. But we can absolutely guess shit. And I want this story to be a lesson. To not behave like a dick as an artist. Because this shit still happens. Like this one time, I got really fucking bored. Because, as mentioned, I'm a teacher. And as a teacher, you have a teachers' meetings, right? And I was sitting there for like hours waiting until my group comes up so we can talk about it. I pull out just this tiny fucking sketchbook because I was bored as fuck. And they had a bunch of cups laying there on a table for us to make coffee and tea and shit like that. And I still have the drawing. And I just drew this because I was fucking bored, right? I do that. I also do little sculptures when I'm bored. And I have a piece of paper and I don't have anything to write on it. So I pull out the sketchbook, start drawing it from boredom. And this fucking boomer artist, he looked through his shoulder at me and he noticed that I'm drawing. I just barely started, but he saw I'm drawing it. And he looked at me with like a disgust and with like a triumph, like, kid, you ain't gonna draw anything properly. And I was like, I ignored it. I completely ignored it because I was just interested in the cups. And then after like 5 minutes, he looked again and he saw that what I'm drawing resembles what's on table. And I guess he got a little pissed off that I can do that. And mofo grabbed his bag and just literally like shoved it on the fucking ground to make the loudest sound he can get. Then he unzipped the fucking bag with like really high clicking sound. And then he pulled out like A4 sketchbook, right? Mine is like 1/5 of that. He took it and placed it on a table, but not just like fucking placed it on a table. Motherfucker did that with force to make a loud bang. And like some people just jumped because he did that unexpectedly. Then he took like the pencil case. And of course he took it like, I don't know how he did that, but he made a lot of fucking noise with it. And then of course placed it on a table with fucking force. And I was like, chill the fuck out, dude. It's not a competition. And then he proceeded to draw. And that was the fucking craziest shit, right? Because he had a pencil and he started drawing like this, you know? I never saw more theatrical way of drawing. Like, what the fuck, dude? And he drew like this, flipped the pages the loudest he could, of course, he did that. And I don't know, I thought he wanted to intimidate me, but I just drew the fucking cups. But after I finished the cups, I didn't draw more, because I was like, no, fuck you, dude. And he, like, proceeded to draw principle. And when he finished, after like 5 minutes, he showed that to him. And the whole fucking meeting had to be stopped, because this motherfucker wanted some attention. Because some kid was just fucking drawing out of boredom. Like, how retarded do you have to be to do that? Like, what the fuck? If you see someone doing it, just tell them. And if they refuse, then fuck them. Like, not sleep with them, just like fuck them, like cancel them, you know? We don't need people like that in an art community, because that's why people think we're assholes. What the fuck? Art is not a competition. Who will be better at your style than you? And of course, some people might copy you, but big fuck you to people that copy other people's work and copycats in general. But fuck copycats anyways. And don't worry, no one is going to be better in your style. You just have to go with the flow and create it and evolve with time, which should happen naturally. And don't care about those competitive pieces of shit. Art ain't no competition. It's whatever you make it to be.